Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mystifying webinar in this March sessions. And today we are still talking about the universe. And in these sessions, we are joined by Harry and also by Jason Hare and also Nick Harras. Jason, he is an industry expert with more than 30 years of experience. And Nick is our very own Red Giant master trainer. Meanwhile, Harry is the senior technical artist who leads the development of the Universe plugin. So if you have particular questions about Universe, feel free to ask them now or in this sessions, not really now. And today we'll be talking about, we'll investigate some ways to create animated looping backgrounds in Red Giant Universe using Progresso, Array Gun, and more. But before we jump into the sessions, let us begin by some usual housekeeping. And as you can see in the Maxon.net events, you can check all the upcoming events held by Maxon. And next Monday, we will have another series of webinar focused on Cinema 4D. And also there will be FMX sessions coming up in May. And if you are missing if you failed to join last week webinar and you want to check out the recordings, you can do so by going to our YouTube channel. And it's called Maxon Training Team. And all the recordings will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And then free t-shirt. You can still get free t-shirt by going into this address, maxon-merch-store.myshopify.com. And please use the code demystifying03. I will paste the code. I will copy and paste the code in the chat later on. Demystifying03. And by using the code, you only need to pay the shipping price. And then if you want to test yourself, feel free to go to redgiant/volume, redgiant.com/volume/certifications. And there you can assess yourself, your knowledge about Trapcode, Magic Bullet, Universe, and also the VFX suite. And if you want to get an overview of what the tools are in Universe, since it's massive, there are a lot of tools. The best way to do that is just by simply going to redgiant.com/product/universe, and it's perfectly laid out. And as you can see, by just hovering over the thumbnails, you will see what each and every tool does. So without further ado, I would like to start the sessions. We would like to start the sessions, today's sessions, by picking up from what we left last week. And to do so, I think we will be starting with you, Nick. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine. We'll start off, and I'll kind of just sum up some stuff that we were trying to cover last week, but we're running out of time.
So I will hand the microphone to you, and I'll make you presenter. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to start showing my screen. And does everyone see After Effects now?
Yes, I can see that, Nick.
Awesome. Great. So just before I begin here in After Effects to show just two text effects, picking up from last week, and then just discussing a versioning workflow, I wanted to add on to one resource that I thought would be really helpful in Universe. So you have all of the tutorials that Max just mentioned on the tutorial page, pretty much for almost every single effect. But there's also a user guide. And one thing that I found useful when I went through the user guide a few years ago was specifically on things such as transitions. I actually have it here on the page where it talks about all the different animation types of transitions within Universe. I thought this was a pretty great workflow in looking at some of those tools, not to mention a breakdown, a written breakdown of each of the other effects as well. And you can do that by looking or going to the page and looking at support on the Red Giant page. I'll share that link at the end. All right, so I'm going to hop into After Effects now. And I wanted to take a look at two text-based effects, or what we can call alpha channel effects. And that's both point zoom and quantum, with quantum being the newest sort of effect. And visually, when you take a look at the thumbnail, this does something slightly different, or a lot of things different than point zoom. But I wanted to start off here by adding a version or a preset of point zoom. So I'm just going to single click on this effect here in After Effects with my Red Giant Universe dashboard. And I'll just go here with the defaults, applying the preset to the clip. And I think it's going to just apply this to a version of, sorry, let's go here to point zoom. And this is the default point zoom that I get. One great thing that I love about working with point zoom or quantum is that you do have an on-screen control to determine where these rays are going to be extruded out from your alpha channel or your text source. So if you don't see the on-screen control or the little crosshair when you select the effect controls here, you could head up to your view options menu and then just make sure that layer controls is clicked on here. And then this is going to give you the control for determining the position of those rays, or in some ways, the position of those rays. In fact, let me grab this crosshair here. I grabbed the wrong crosshair overall because I have 3 different types of rays on this actual image, but you can see now that I'm moving the actual rays of the point zoom. One thing that we can do on top of this, of course, we have control of the length, and this point zoom is being produced behind the actual subject. And why I found when you first look at the actual thumbnails in your universe dashboard under the glow category for both point zoom and quantum, quantum also appears to be a light rays type effect, although with multiple colors that only shines out behind the text source. And one advantage to quantum is that not only does it have that ability to go behind the text, but if you look down at the presets, you can also see that with a negative value, you can produce it in front of the text. The other added benefit, this point zoom is taking the colors of the source that it's been applied to, which can be very useful in various situations, not to mention that there's a certain type of blur added to the point zoom. If I look at quantum, there's the production here behind it. You have up to 3 glows that you can add to your rays. And you can also determine the length of each of those glows. So with my first example here, those are the 3 glows. In fact, let's start with 1. And with your first glow, you can actually choose from a bunch of preset color maps, okay, beyond the color of your actual alpha channel source. So let me go here and just select one of those presets. And we can see here just with the mix of various colors, it gives us a different result. But you can have up to 3 of these glows to create a really interesting set of rays. And if you take I believe it's the streak length value, and you made that into a negative number, which I actually have on this quantum source, those rays can then be produced to the right or just directly in front of the subject. So I have a streak length here of a negative 710, and then with the combination, actually 2 light streaks. This could be used in conjunction with some of the stylization tools, such as Hollow Matrix, with example of alpha channel sources, or if you're looking for hologram type treatments. And in fact, I have an example here in After Effects where this is a combination of using trap code form just to solo out the foreground objects, and that trap code form, which has just a very subtle bit of animation in terms of rotation and the rotation of the disc and the repetitive pattern. This was combined with a version of Universe's HUD components here, which were all animated without keyframes on the element level. And then this was combined with trap code Lux to create a light source here at the background, which you referencing the ambient light, or sorry, the point light in the scene, and then point zoom, where the position was keyframed to match that light source. And I have another example. Instead of point zoom, if I go to the form layer, which was baked out, of using quantum, and we can see the different colors of the rays versus the treatment of point zoom, taking the colors of the source to produce those rays. So a few different choices there. In looking at all of these stylistic effects and then going back to our process with looking at text last week and then versioning through Frame.io, which Jason and I shared a workflow, I thought about versioning in different types of applications. And I use Final Cut for cutting videos every once in a while when it's shorter format for delivery. And every once in a while, for some reason this is not showing this clip, what I need to do is try different effects and then decide which one I'm going to use later. So sometimes that's going to be a review of someone making that decision. Other times it's just my own experimentation. And Final Cut has something really cool built inside of the application to it, which is called auditioning. And what it involves is taking either a clip or adding another clip to this and making a nested source and auditioning different lengths or different clips with different effects. And this clip actually has an audition. I will show you. It's kind of like a nest. And what I have here is several different types of universe lens flares and also some overlight treatments. I'm just not sure what I want for a look. So what I can do with this audition is if I flip between these clips, let me get my playhead just over this clip so we can see that a bit better, is I can see these different types of light leak treatments, not being sure which one I want to use as either a transitional source or the light source coming over here that I've added to the shot. I can audition these different types of effects or looks directly in my Final Cut timeline. And sometimes I'll do this while showing someone, a client, back where they'll see each of those looks and then approve one that could be the overall look of the timeline or just that look for the one clip. And Max, this is a process in Davinci Resolve that you use quite a bit too, with versioning inside of Resolve with your color correction looks. Am I correct?
Yeah, Nick. Wow. I really don't know that you can do that in Final Cut as well. That is really cool. Yeah. In Resolve, you can do a versions to your grade, and you can then later on review or auditions your grade. So you can sit down with a director of photography and go through your look that you develop. In Resolve, you can do that simply by just right-click the clip, and then after that you select the add local versions, and then after that you can rename the versions, and then you can compare it side by side, having like a split screen, and you can view it like all of them. But I really didn't know that you can do this in Final Cut Pro. This is really cool.
Yeah, and you can do this at any time, like either basically dropping a clip onto a source. If you're used to Premiere Pro, you'll be used to replacing, you might be used to replacing a clip with another clip. And that process is done where you take something from the project panel, you drop it onto a clip using the Option key, and then when you release your mouse, it will replace that clip with another source, absorbing its effects. In Final Cut, it's the same thing. And then there's also the option of actually taking the clip source and then from the clip menu, choosing audition. And here, this is something unique to Final Cut. And while, of course, you're going to get way better 3D text if you're using a motion graphic application, it's interesting that there is 3D text built into a nonlinear editor. And here are just different sources of quantum on this rotated 3D text that I have here. That I wasn't sure which one to use, and also has these ray elements that were keyframed from that positive to the negative value. But the cool part is I can also directly in my timeline and playing live use shortcut keys to switch between these different clip sources of that while playing back in my timeline. And then when I know which effect I'd like, I could actually basically render or bake the audition so that not all of the 4 clips or 5 clip decisions are inside the timeline. And yeah, that was it for my little demonstration of versioning from last week. And I know, Harry, you have some really cool stuff to show.
I have stuff. We'll see. We'll see how cool it is.
And just as I transition over to you, I was curious, do you use, when you look at point zoom versus quantum, are you finding yourself using quantum more in your workflow?
You know, I was gonna chat just quite briefly about why there are those 2 different tools. Point zoom came first, and it was actually a specific request from Jace Hansen. He's an FUI designer. He's worked on Star Wars and Avengers and all that kind of stuff. And he just said, like, I just need a basic. What he said is, I need shine, like trapcode shine, which projects light rays outward. I need it in reverse, and it's so difficult to assemble this using effects. So that's where that came from. That's why it just kind of takes the point source, because it was really designed for kind of what you're showing, like HUD graphics, FUI graphics that would look like they're coming out of a point projection, and then oh, and my headphones just died. Oh, you know what? Sorry, hold on. I think one of my kids upstairs just tried to log into school, and sometimes it grabs my headphones. Okay, no, I'm still here. Sorry about that. This is the world we live in. So quantum came later, and quantum has fractal noise mixed in and color mapping. It's actually 3 different passes, and each of them are color mapped with the 3 colors that you choose, and then they're all kind of staggered and overlaid on top of each other. So it kind of makes more of a rich motion graphic-y kind of look versus just that sort of plain point projection kind of thing. So I would say I definitely would be using quantum more. I think point zoom is just kind of a plain, very specific kind of effect that has its thing, has its purpose. Okay, I can't hear anybody.
I can hear you, Harry.
Oh, okay. It just went very quiet. I'm like, oh, okay.
But we're listening.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so well, let me then switch to show my screen. Sorry, it was.
Yeah, we can see your
screen. I'll be talking for like 10 minutes about a project, and then it'll turn out that I was disconnected and that nobody heard what I was saying.
Happens to me as well.
People can see your screen. Okay. I guess that's that. So you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I had a couple different things planned for today, so we'll see how quickly I move through this, because as much as I plan things, how much time it's going to take is definitely a separate kind of thing. One thing we haven't really spoken about in this this series is background design, and a ray gun is a really great tool for doing that. We were talking about this earlier, sort of the Julia Child finished version here of the casserole, but I'll go through and kind of make this, but we'll make it in a kind of accelerated manner. So I'm going to make a solid for a ray gun, and let me know if you want me to turn my camera off or not. There's arguments for both. Some people want to see the speaker for accessibility reasons. Some people like to have more screen visible, so I'm open to suggestions. A ray gun is under the motion graphics category of Universe. And the whole...
Sorry to interrupt you, Harry.
Yeah.
I think you can just show your camera, since one of the audience just letting us know that they can hide it in their own end if they wish. That's perfect.
Perfect. It is. Okay, so is this webinar recorded? Yes. So Array Gun it actually came about because I was working on a side freelance project, and kind of the go-to tool that I would use for making grids of objects was, or at the time was Trapcode Form. And it's good for doing that in that it makes grids and you can put custom elements into it. But the whole idea of making custom particles and sampling those and splitting the custom like it was like I just want a tool that makes shape grids, and that's exactly what Array Gun does. And it's just kind of it's a fun design tool. It's great for backgrounds and whatnot. So that's kind of what we'll be doing here. And specifically, we'll be taking some custom elements and using those as shapes in there, taken from Progresso or maybe HUD components. We'll see. But just the quick background on Array Gun. It can generate a line grid, which we can turn on and off. And the main section, or most of the settings you're going to find, are in this shape grid section here. And really all it's doing is randomly scattering shapes that you select from. Right now there's 4 different shape types. If people want more, we could always add more, but right now there's 4. And I think by default we have 2 defined. So I have a square and an ellipse. So therefore it's randomly scattering either a square or an ellipse. If I change this to a triangle, it'll be random scattering of squares and triangles. And then it's taken the color map from up here, where you can say just use color A or use color A to B, or randomly interpolate from color A to B, or interpolate horizontally. And then you can also use all these different color palettes based on the first color. I need to actually disable the second color. It doesn't do that right now. So it's just looking at that first color. But anyway, I'll just leave this on color AB and just have it random. It will randomly pick between color A and color B. So I'll make a new solid, and we said, well, we're going to actually use a custom element here. So I'm going to use, we'll use Progresso for this one. Progresso came about similar to Array Gun. It was just kind of I need a progress bar. And there's a lot of great templates out there and some scripts and whatnot that do this. I just tried to put everything in one place that does progress bars. Now, actually, I'm sorry, I made this 600 by 600. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, 800 by 800, just to make it include more of the graphic. So by default, it's using this linear bar. I'm going to go to the presets, and we'll choose a radial preset, like I guess this one right here. Minimal rounded. Did that work? Yep. So we'll use this as a custom element inside Array Gun. So this will be one of the shapes that we include. So rather than a procedural shape, it's going to look at a custom layer. I'll make this just a little bit bigger. So this is using an arc type. So I'll go in here and make it just a little bit fatter and bring the diameter down just a bit. And I think I'll end up kind of animating this progress over time, but I'll come back and do that. Let's just get this established as a custom layer. So looking back at my sample here, looks like I put in some plain circles. So I'll do that for the first one. Ellipse. And rather than a filled ellipse, I will use a stroked ellipse. And it has a stroke color right here, but if we want all of the strokes, the stroke colors to follow the existing color palette, we can go back up here to the top. Sorry, I'm using Windows and it scrolls backwards. Stroke uses color scheme. There, so we can see the E. So now the stroke is actually following the same color pattern as everything else. And so I've got that in there, and then shape 2, we will set to one of our custom layers. So we have all these procedural shapes in here, and then the last one is to use a custom layer. And in the custom settings, if I select Progresso layer and I go in here, use the, as they call the glow cat feature, get layer output without creating another thing or something like that. Go GLO. Anyway, setting it to use effects and masks. So it's going to grab the output, post effect, post mask, and then as you can see, it's using the Progresso output. Now it's colorizing it using the existing color. So I'm actually going to go back in here and just set this to a neutral color. The fill color is kind of a blue. I'll just set this to a white. In fact, in my design, I used a gradient. So we're going to do oh, actually I have this backwards. So I want this white and I want the other one black. And as I am, yeah, so it looks like that. So let's turn that layer off. Just checking this, looks like his screen is frozen. Hopefully, let me know if you can still see me. Full screen, back to not.
I can still see you fine, Harry.
Okay, good.
Same with me, Harry.
Great. Okay, so that's one element. And then I'm going to duplicate this and we'll make another Progresso element. We'll call this Progresso 2. And we'll use a different preset in here. Let's go to choose a preset and we'll use something like this. Got the little ticks on it. Let me solo that. And this is using an arc as well, but it's using a segmented arc. So in the arc segments section here, I can turn up the number of segments that it's using, how wide they are, and how, oops, I'm still controlling width, I want the height, maybe a little less wide. And let's also bring down the diameter, something like that. Stroke width. Okay, so that's a second type, and also neutralize the fill. Whoops, this is the foreground fill color. There we go. So that will also be an element. So in array gun, if I go to another shape, so we already defined one for shape 2. Let's go into shape 3, set this to a custom layer, and set that to Progresso 2, back to mask output. And whoop. And then I think in my example, I pulled a fourth shape in that was actually using a shape from the library, like this one right here, actually this abstract shape. So if you double click on, or you click on choose a shape, there's a number of pre-made shapes in here that ship with array gun. So I'm gonna choose that one. Oh, did I just crash? No, I just double clicked on it. So now it's pulling in that shape. So I'll kind of randomize these in terms of their size. So up here in the, whoops, each section has a random shape random and rotation random and all that, but you can go to the top here just under the shape grid group and turn up the scale random so that you will randomize all of them. And I think I left and check my finished casserole. Yeah, we've got a grid, so I'll turn the grid back on. And it has both a grid as well as a subdivided grid. So this is the main grid, and then I can turn on yet another grid because there's lots of grids, people like grids, and just kind of darken that so it's a less obtrusive kind of grid. I think I used fewer points in here too. So up here, this is how many points are actually on the shape grid. Now, I'm aware that like as fun as it might be to design something like this as a background, if it's really busy like this, it becomes a bit useless as a background because you just got so much stuff you're fighting with it. So there's a section in here called the effector, and this is an area that we can control things like size, rotation, position, or opacity. So if I check a effect size, I can make a section larger, or I can make it smaller like that. So it can make a bit of an area to use, to place text. It's a very, if you use Cinema 4D, it's kind of borrowing the same idea. It's just an area in which we can affect that parameter, and then the height and width are right here as a percentage of the total grid size. So, so if I bring this down just a little bit, we're just going to kind of clear out an area to put our text. And lastly, there's a section just called the single shape, where you can just put, well, a single shape, because sometimes you just want a single shape. So I figured, well, why not build that right in? And let's say I use a rectangle, make it bigger, and then bring up the aspect. Whoops, let's set this to maybe 3. And I want this on top, so the single shape can go on top like that. Maybe bring down the opacity just a little bit and set this to a bluish something or other. Blue is fine. So that gives us a nice little spot for our text, and then we can layer some glow on top. I know everybody likes their VFX optical glow. There's nothing wrong with it. Universe recently had a bit of an overhaul to the glow plugin as well. It has that coveted sort of inverse square fall off that everybody's looking for. So I'll bring up the overall intensity, getting some banding. I don't know, I'm assuming it's the sharing of GoToWebinar, because, oh wait, sorry, no, I take that back. I have my project set to 8-bit. All right, blaming the wrong software. So yeah, I had some banding in there, but my project was set to 8-bit. So I'll bring this intensity down just a little bit. I'll bring up the threshold just to kind of include a little bit less in there. So anyway, point is, Universe Glow is actually quite capable in and of its own. How are we doing on time? We have Jason left.
Yeah, I think we're doing fine, Harry.
Okay, I'll try to go through this super quick, because I think this is more going to be a matter of check out the file download. We'll post this project, because a lot of this I'll go quickly through. But I don't remember what release it was, but After Effects included the ability to import a number of data formats, and I believe Jason after me is going to show his approach using spreadsheets and whatnot. My approach in this, at least in this iteration right here, is using the JSON format. JSON really is just a data format. It's kind of like an XML document or something like that, where you can have data just kind of stored in groups. There's lots of different ways to format JSON, but I can, in this case, I can define, let's say, our scenes, let's say scene 100, and then for each of the scenes, I'll have perhaps a data that spells out the first name, the last name, the title, the person's title, as well as the company that they work for. Now, you'll see up here at the top, I've also established 2 different data sets that establish style. So I can pull in, let's say, a font name, font size, and a font color. And the cool thing about this is, like, if you're in one of those projects where you've got maybe 100 titles, lower thirds or whatever, and as great as it is to start linking things together with expressions and all that, once somebody says, hey, let's change the color, you can define things with expressions, but and not to say that I'm not going to use expressions, but we're going to use them in a different way, such that I have one point of truth with this document here. And if I change the font color here, it will ripple through and update all of the lower thirds that I've set. I think the most technically challenging thing is just to make sure that your JSON file is actually formatted correctly. All of your brackets and commas and all that kind of stuff. But beyond that, JSON is, I don't want people to be afraid of using data, and using JSON, because well, let's just do a quick example here. And in doing this, I'm actually going to be using the After Effects type, because this is actually just a lot easier to drive with data. In fact, to be completely transparent, the Universe text tools lack the ability to be data-driven right now. Something I'm looking into, but it is, we just can't pull the source text in via, sorry, I'm trying to scooch this window out of the way so I can get to my character. In fact, I'll just leave this. We'll just leave this ugly because we're going to drive this content. So the JSON file itself can be imported just like media, right? So once I write out my file and have all the data in here, it's just a piece of data that can be imported. And when I drop it into my composition, and if I twirl this open, we'll see that we've got the data and all the different components of the data in here. And even if you've done just base, you're not an expressions expert, but if you just want to do some basic stuff, like I want to link the source text, if I add an expression by alt-clicking there, and I grab the source text and grab, let's say, the first name, that first name, I just use the pick whip and just grab it from that. So I don't really have to type out any code or anything like that. I can just grab the content and assign it like that. Now, here's the tricky part, or the tricky thing that I did here that is a bit of a setup, long setup, but it's set up for you, and we'll post the project. One of the things in even more recent of a release of After Effects is the ability to define your styles in the expression itself, in that source text. So when I use the pick whip, I was just defining the content, but there are style expressions in there now that allow us to define the font size, define the font color, as well as the text content. So in this case, I just made a style comp. I made one composition that defines what my style is going to be. And I assigned a few variables here, what the font is going to be. So that's grabbing the data outline. And I have two different styles, one for the, let's say we're doing a lower third, the top style and the bottom style, or the name and the title or whatever. So that's grabbing style 1 out of here. So right here, style 1, it's grabbing the font. And I'm grabbing the name, the literal name of the font. And the size as well as the color. I'm doing it as a hex value. It's possible to do it via RGB. It's a little cumbersome. I don't think we'll have time. You have to define red and green and blue separately, and then it's just if you can do it via hex, well, I think it's a lot easier just to do it via hex value. So defining the font size, and the font color via variables. That's all we're doing. We're just grabbing what the values are. And then there's the expression, right? The text.sourceText.createStyle. That's a function that just says, hey, we're making a new style, and everything that happens from here is going to follow this style. And normally these are kind of tacked on to each other, like, in fact, I kind of formatted it to make it a little more friendly, but I think that's a little deceiving how it's set right now. So this generally is all one big line, and you can see how that gets a little, can get a little messy. That's the thing about JavaScript, though, is if there's no semicolon at the end, I can actually just drop these down to a new line. I tab this in, so then I can start separating where I'm setting the font in a period, drop that down, set the font size to the, I'm literally pointing at the screen like you guys can see me. You can't see me. So font size right here, setting the fill color right here using that font color. And notice, because I used a hex value, I have to use a little function in here that's hex to RGB. So it's going to turn that hex into an RGB value. And then setting the text content. And I literally just typed in, this is the primary style right here, so I can see which one's the primary style. So all I'm doing is just defining what my styles are. This is just a style comp. And once I establish this in any of my other compositions here, so let's say right here, Simon Walker, super swell guy at Maxon. For this, I'm doing a couple things. I'm grabbing, let's skip over this scene for a second. I'm just grabbing the first and last name as my text content right here, variable first name from the JSON data right in there, and the last name, pretty easy. And then I'm grabbing the scene. The scene is right here. That's the topmost value in each section. So I'm grabbing, I'm sorry, backing up here. What I need to do is name my compositions appropriately. So you notice I named this composition scene 100, and this next one's scene 200, I think, where I put Gavin Belson as my name in there. I have a list of random names, and that was just one that I grabbed. So what I'm doing is grabbing the name or the scene from my my comp right here. So this comp.name.substring 0 to 5. So all I'm doing is taking the first 5 characters and saying that is the scene number. And if I can find that scene number in my data, right? Say scene 100, it's going to stick that right in, right here, scene. Right, so it's grabbing the scene value, scene 100 first name. So scene 100 first name is Simon Walker. So if I change this scene, or let's say I duplicate this, I'll just duplicate, call the scene 150. And if I open this up, this should now say, Jason Hare, your title's too long, Jason. But hey, it works. So what's great about this is rather than defining the styles independently, like going back in and defining the font and all that kind of stuff, I can look at a layer in any comp and say, use that style right here. And that's what this last line is doing, saying, look in the comp called style comp, look for a layer called style-primary, and then assign the source text style to that. Right, so text.sourceText.style will grab the style of that layer and bring it right over and assume all the properties of that, the font color, all that kind of stuff. So if I change it there, it'll change it everywhere that I use the text style. And then I have to then set the text, right, because otherwise it's going to not, it's going to grab the text along with that. So I have to manually define what the set text is right here. So we're just grabbing the first name and last name, and that's the top title. And we do the same thing for this bottom one right here. And this might be like, yes.
May I interrupt you?
Yes.
Warren, our audience want to know if kerning can be added into After Effects.
Kerning individual pairs. That's a good question, which is always my response when I'm not entirely sure. We can look at the reference in here under the expression menu, text, properties, and properties, right? Because who likes properties? Auto letting, set tracking. The tricky thing about kerning, and I run into this with plugins as well, is that you have to define that specific pair, right? Like tracking, we can just say tracking is a global value. Kerning is this value between character 4 and character 5, and then, so I don't think it is, but I'll have to double check. Yeah, I've run into this with our Universe text plugins. In fact, we just added kerning to typecast, and we put in there like 4 different kerning pairs that you can select and scooch those together, because there's a few fonts that you run into, like DIN is a classic example, whereas the second you make a 10, the 0 feels like it's like way too far away from the 1. You always have to scooch them together. But yeah, I don't think you can define kerning here, which is a bummer.
I see. Thank you very much, Harry.
Yeah. So it's just defining that. So we'll just do the let's say I pick a color. Let's grab let's say we want a cool red. So if I grab this, we'll just see this ripple throughout. Just, I've done all the setup here. So so I'll put that in there. Let's say we set the lower one to Proxima. Producer comes along and said, nope, we're using Proxima for the second line. And now Simon is now Simon Skywalker. Okay, so I hit save. And everything ripples and updates in every comp that I'm using. That's referencing the JSON. So it's one of those things. It's like that classic scenario of how, is the setup worth it if you're doing like 8 lower thirds or titles or whatever? Probably not. But this is, one of those jobs where you've got 100 or 200 or whatever. This really can be a lifesaver because this JSON, I've got this in Dropbox. This could be anywhere. Anybody in the world could be editing this while I work on my stuff. Just got to be careful of your formatting. Don't forget your commas. The last one does not have a comma. But everything else should have a comma after this bracket. And then there you go. So defining the style and the text content within JSON and making a little background. A lot of stuff. I guess I overplanned for this one, but I'll tidy this up and we'll get this project posted for people to download. And that is my presentation.
I was going to say that's so cool, Harry, especially if you had like 100 compositions with that text or that same style, and all of a sudden there's a branding change down the line a couple years later.
Oh gosh, yeah, when I worked in Detroit, I was at Daimler Chrysler Studios, and boy, we would get these brand changes, and it's be in the middle of a project, and I'll have 80 lower thirds. I'm going into each one, someday I'll be able to do this. So yeah, getting a branding change or a color change, or switching from bold to regular or whatever. Having the style definitions are great addition. Gosh, we've been asking for those definable and expressions for a long time. So I'm really happy to see those in After Effects expressions now.
I was going to add that I use Adobe Color quite a bit, which is like Adobe's online resource. And it has like a place where you can have hex codes. If you guys don't know about this, there's an actual extension that's now built into After Effects Adobe Color. And then there's a separate website. One idea of it is that you could take a picture, let's say in an environment, grab some colors, and it would make a 5 swatch color palette for you.
Right? Yeah.
But you can actually copy the hex codes from the website, and you could put it into the JSON in terms of your branding or your text workflows.
Yeah, it used to be Cooler, right? Kuler, and then somebody at some point decided that that's too confusing, and now so it's Color. And yeah, you get all these like analogous and triadic monotone color palettes, and you can upvote them, like so you can look at the most popular ones. And I've used it quite a bit. It's actually a good place. It's a really good resource. I'm sorry. Yeah, somebody's talking. I have too much to cover, and I am sorry for speaking too quickly. In fact, my wife is a language instructor, an ESL instructor, and now works in learning development, and I've always tried to keep that in mind. And today I did not. I had too much going on, and I apologize for speaking English that is too jumbled and garbled. I know how hard it is. I'm taking a German class right now, actually, and when I listen to conversations, they're so fast. It is so hard to follow.
That is very surprising. That's really nice. So you speak German as well, Harry?
I'm in what they call the A1, right? There's different levels of certification. There's A1, A2, and then B1, B2, C1, C2. So I'm working through my A1 certification right now. So.
Wunderbar. So yeah, thank you very much, Harry, for very nice input, nice tips and tricks there. Now let's go to Jason. Jason, do you want to show your stuff?
Yep, let's do it.
I can make you a presenter, Jason. Or you already
I've
did.
already stolen it.
Perfect.
So what I was going to demonstrate is sort of the use of universe tools, and sort of along the same lines as what Harry showed, but probably a little less code. So it might be a bit easier for people who are scared by code. But the idea is to make a name super that you can then regenerate lots of times. I use a third-party plugin for this all the time in my work, and I use this thing called comps from Spreadsheet, which I've been using for years, and I noticed that the price has dropped considerably. Basically, the idea is you can build separate elements and feed them from a spreadsheet. So to start off with, I've already pre-built this just because it takes a bit of time with all the layers, but I have a Google document which you can see here. So I've set up a range of columns, and this is quite a collaborative workflow because obviously I'm in London, Nick's in Canada, Harry's in America, and Max is in Germany. So everybody you can see people entering this spreadsheet. So if they're going to enter their information in here, and then later I'll use this to build the actual graphics. So I'll move that aside and just show you this approach. So Simon's making a guest appearance as my background because you need someone to put a name super on. And again,
That's really nice picture.
yeah, I think it's from the Brazil World Cup that we were testing the green screen, and Simon happened to be in the room and became a guinea pig for the tests, and probably regrets me having this file, but there you go. And I've used a ray gun similar to Harry was saying. I've just made a background that just has some movement because the shot's a chroma key shot. So I want to build a name super, and this is something I do quite a lot, is I like to layer up different effects. So I've sort of got an idea in my mind, and I want to use a flag element. So I think if we look at the flags first, what I've actually done is I brought in 5 flags. You can see here. Normally you could bring in a lot more, but for the sake of this, I've just brought in the 5 that are useful to us. And I've made a little comp here where I've stacked all the flags on top of each other. And I have this little text layer, which this just has what we call a trigram. So it's a 3-letter code that identifies the flag. So you can see at the moment that code is AUS, which signifies Australia. If I were to double click that and say type in Canada, you can see it reveals the Canadian flag. And basically all I've done is on each flag, I've got a simple opacity expression, which you can see it's pointing at my text layer at the top, and it basically says if that text layer says AUS, then make the value 100, otherwise make it 0. So in this case, you can see it no longer says Australia, it says Canada. So this value is 0, but then you can see the next expression, which it says if this value is Canada, make it 100, otherwise make it 0. So you can see the Canada flag is on. And then obviously I hide the text because that's just used to drive the opacity of the flags. I'll just put that back to Australia for the building of it. The one thing to be careful with that is the text has to match exactly. So for example, it has to be capitals because the expression is looking for that. So I've told the guys when they fill in the Google spreadsheet that they have to use caps and also use the codes that I've predefined. But that's not normally a big problem. The only other trick here is I don't know what you call this thing, but I've got this little sort of up arrow before the country. The reason for that is using the comps from Spreadsheet tool, which you'll see later. That's telling this layer that it's going to get the information from one of the fields in the spreadsheet. So that little icon is telling it that information is going to come from the spreadsheet. So that way, whatever the guys type in, their code will define which flag comes on. So if we come back to our composition, normally I wouldn't do it with a background. Quite often I would build it with a background so I can see it. And in fact, something I do all the time is turn on guide layer. And that way I can see it when I'm building it, but when I render it, I'll just get a nice clean super coming out. So first, if we look at the flag layer that I brought in, all I've done with this is I've just squashed it a little bit because I want to put it in a circle. So then the next thing is to make a shape, and that's the shape I've decided to put the flag in. So instead of making that a layer, I'll use that as an alpha mat, which will then just give me a circle of the flag. A few little tricks I like to do is I'll add a bulge tool onto that, which you'll notice as soon as I turn that on, it just bulges it and gives it a sort of spherical shape, so it makes it look quite 3D. And then another little trick is using some shape layers. So I've just built a little shape layer here, which I'll turn on, and it's quite simple. I've just made a little ellipse, which is a white ellipse, and then I've just drawn this dodgy shape to darken that. And then when I get off it, you can see it suddenly makes it look quite three-dimensional and gives it the appearance of 3D, which is one of the things I like doing in After Effects, of adding depth to something that doesn't have depth. And then because this flag shape was, I've just drawn those shapes on the picture and the axis is over here, I can't use the rotate on that. So what I've then done is I've created a null, which I'll turn on, which is just centered by position to the flag. So I've just typed in the position exactly as that appears. So I know that that null is exactly in the center of that. And then I've pick whipped the elements to that rotate. So that light and shade goes to the rotate. So then you can see here, when I rotate this, which I've already got keyframed, you can see my little glint moving around. So it sort of changes the light source, if you like. So that's the first step. And this is going to signify where each of the trainers are from. And now I want to frame that. So what I've done is I've chosen to use HUD. Another technique, as you can see, I've already animated this, but what I tend to do is I'll pick a frame like this and I'll build the overall look bit by bit. And then normally a second step is I would go and animate it. So in this case, because I've already done the animation, all I've done is the flag zooms up. And you can see I've got the other flag related layers. Like if I change those, we'll make these orange. I'm normally quite big on color coding. I find it just helps me stay organized. So we can see here those layers are all related to the flag and they're all sort of parented to the flag so that way they all move in one go. So I only have to keyframe one section. So next I've used HUD, and HUD basically gives you a series of 4 elements. In this case, I just want 2 circles, and I've actually keyframed the circles so that they sort of come on staggered. And it just creates a bit of movement, so you get the 3 things form one after the other, as you can sort of see. A fairly low-res version there, but you can get the idea. One thing I did realize is they're a bit boring. They're sitting there, so we'll add a little bit of animation to that. So we'll go to the beginning. We'll just set a keyframe on the Z rotation. Come along to the end, and let's say give it 2 rotations, and that way you'll now have them rotating. Now at the moment the second element is linked to the first element, so because the first element is rotating, the second one is automatically rotating. But what I'm going to do to counter that, I want that one to, it's taking the scale information, but what I want to do is counter the rotation. So if I put Z rotation on there, come to the end, and then we'll actually set that to -4, so it'll go in the opposite direction. So now there's 2 lines. If I just do that, so we can see that my screen's not updating very well, but they're going in opposite. Oh, there you go, you can see that now. So they're going in opposite direction. So that's using HUD as an element, just to add sort of, gives us a nice little design element. So the idea is sort of building up a graphic from element by element. The next thing we're doing in this case is I've put the name in, and I've just sort of written the generic word for the moment to give me a position. And then we're also going to have a designation, which is the second line of what they do. I've just chosen whatever font, and I've just done a typewriter animation, which is a standard, so it just types on, and the other one mixes on at the same time. But again, you can see they've got the little up arrow, so it's telling it they're going to be fed from the spreadsheet. So now I want to put like a little element behind that, and this is where I use Progresso, the same tool Harry used, because I quite like Progresso, because as well as it being a graph tool, you can do things like the little thing I've built here. You can see I've just used it to build sort of 2 sets of bars. One's a bar and one is like the background bar is blue. And just by playing with the different heights, you can see here I can sort of control that would normally be the inside of the graph, but just as a design idea, I've made that sort of stretch out to fill a big box. And then I've just animated the segment total width. So if we look at the keyframes, there's 2 animations. You've got the blue bar comes out first, And then a few frames later, we've just got the progress animate separately, and that way it just gives me a staggered animation. And then everything's on each keyframes. And this
You
way,
always manage to use things in a way that I never thought that people would use them. This is
yeah, well,
another.
I think I'm obsessed with. I love plugins because they save time, but I hate when you just see a plugin and you say, "Oh, I know what that plugin is." So I tend to always layer them up and stagger them, and that's actually why I quite like your array gun demo with using Progresso in that. I think last week I showed actually using text as one of the elements in array gun because this probably took me about 20 minutes this morning to build, and it's quite, I don't know, it looks quite cool. It's obviously it could be finessed a bit more, but you can see it looks quite 3D, and a couple of different tools to create a few elements. And then one sort of finishing touch, we'll also add a lens flare using the null light factory. Now, obviously, in the VFX suite, you get the full-blown lens flare, but in this case, I just need a simple lens flare. And if we turn it on, you can see I've just gone from, although my dashboard's not going to work, so that's very nice of you. Okay, we won't worry about that. But basically, there's a nice library of flares within the tools, and I picked one that was suitable, and then I just scaled it down to make it a bit smaller. And then the keyframes I've set on that is a simple position keyframe. So I make it start on the flag and sort of trace along the line, and then it simply fades on and then fades off. So then the end result is like a little animation that you can see it pops on, the bars animate, the text comes on, and then you get a nice lens flare glint along, it sort of all adds on top of it. Oh, and I forgot there was one extra layer I added just because I could. So I've used the type on tool, which you can see I've actually messed around with the Progresso bar, so I've sort of ruined my design. So if we get this, and we'll go back to say 240 height, so it clears the text. The thing I like about the type on tool is you can edit a load of text. So in this case, I've just written Red Giant Universe over and over and over again, and I've picked a color from the graphic. If I was spending more time, I'd actually give choice of color, and you can do all kinds of extra things. But for an example, this is just using a type on, so it just sort of types on that text, which is just yet another element and sort of ties us. So you'll have the person's name, what we do, and a layer of text in there. So that's sort of my end result. So you can see that we've got three elements that are going to come. So we've got the name, the designation, and in that flag composition, we have the country. Now, one thing, because that flag composition is going to appear over and over again, I've added a little, what do you call it, an exclamation mark on the front of the flags layer. And that tells After Effects that when I'm using comps from Spreadsheet, every comp we make, it has to get its own copy of flags. And the reason for that is obviously the spreadsheet, everybody's got their own version. So we need that to update. So we're going to end up with different ones. So if we save that and we're happy with that, the next step is we're going to use the automation now. So if we come back to our Google Sheet, and you can see magically the team have filled it in from wherever they are. There you go, Max has just filled that in live. So what I can do is, the trick here is I'm using Google Docs because this is brilliant, and I actually use this. I make hundreds of slates for various football matches, and rather than sit there and actually sit in an edit suite or on After Effects build them, I actually get the producers to type up all the information, and they just provide it to me, and then I use this technique to build them. So now we have our information. I'm just going to download this as a TSV, which is what comes from Spreadsheet uses. And it's as simple as pick somewhere. Let's put it on the desktop for now, so it's easy to find. And it's a TSV file, so it takes no time. So now we go to comps from Spreadsheet, which if you end up getting your hands on it, come back into After Effects, it appears down the bottom here. And when you run it, you can actually use this to make text objects. So for example, if I wanted to create a text object, you'll see that little icon in the front. When you use it, if I call it test, you'll see this will create a text layer with that little icon on the front, and then you can type your text in there. I tend to just do it manually and don't do it that way, but you get the same result. So if we go to comps from Spreadsheet, it's quite simple. I just run the comps from Spreadsheet plugin. It has a little bit of a think. We then go and find our thing, which here it is, and you can see here's all our information. When I open it, it analyzes it. It matches the layer name with the top column in my spreadsheet. So you can see I've deliberately named them name, designation, and country, and made it case sensitive. So it's automatically applied to all of these. Title I'm not worried about because the title column is actually what I want to use to make the composition name. I'll come down here and tell that to use from the spreadsheet, the title column. And then this is everything it makes is going to put in a folder. So let's call this automation. We can also, you can bring in different images and lots of extra layers. You can also set the rendering, which I won't worry about. But for the point of automation, if I hit OK, it allows me if I want to make a copy of the project to save me demolishing this one. But in this case, we'll just do it in here. And you can see as quick as that, it's added 5 to the render list. It's added a folder called automation. If we come in here, we can see there's an imports folder and pre-comps, which you don't worry about. If we double click Harry, we'll see Harry's put his name, his information, and he's given himself a US flag. My one, which I had filled in earlier, although I'm in the UK, I'm from Australia originally. Max, there we go. So you saw how quick that was to make 5, and we do this. This is used on a number of TV shows I work on, where I've used this process because we can then give the producers the spreadsheet. They fill in the spreadsheet through the week as they're making the show, and then the graphics person just comes along at the end and just hits go, and basically there's all your supers. We can go to the render queue and just export it, and they're done. You saw how quick that was to build 5. And then likewise, you're talking, if next week they decide something's different, I can get rid of that if we were to start again. So if we're back at the beginning, if next week something were to happen and I don't know, something big, like let's make that green, the branding's changed and we want to go really ugly and go green and red, and so we want that's our new branded look, we can simply save the file, go Maxon spreadsheet, run it again. You know all that's going to be set up. This one, normally I would leave that on remember. Hit OK. And there you go. You can see as quick as that, we've made them again. But now they've all got our new really ugly look. So it's a very useful tool in the sense that if there's a slight tweak, like it's good if you've got a different logo. Like I use this for sports teams, where quite often instead of the flag, I'll have the logo of the sports team. And that way you can just type in a code to choose the team, and it just allows, it streamlines a job that would otherwise take a lot of time and is quite annoying. And that way you're giving the responsibility, rather than the graphics operator getting the name right, the producers, who are the people who've actually interviewed the people, have done all of that work for you. So that's quite a rapid look at a workflow, but you can see that sort of using a lot of Universe tools in a different way to combine a different look, and then automating it with Maxon Spreadsheet, which is a practical application that I use a lot.
That is really, really, really cool technique, Jason. That's really awesome to see it update live.
Yeah, exactly. Especially how quick it is. And as I say, I do this making clocks for different highlights programs. So to save the editors doing it on the day, we might be editing various packages, and I can sort of generate 100 clocks in a matter of minutes. It just saves a huge amount of time.
I didn't know about that AE script, Jason. That's awesome.
Yeah, AE scripts is great. They've taken quite a lot of my money over the years.
That specifically, that spreadsheet one. And
Yeah.
It made me think, I love the fact that it adds it to the render queue. It made me think of how you could use something like if you were to send this to, say, Premiere Pro, and add a bunch of markers to the timeline and using an automate to sequence how quickly you could get each of these lower thirds in the timeline.
Yeah, exactly. Like the method you can do it goes on and on. There's so much potential with it. But as I say, I bought this tool probably 10 years ago. I think the guy who wrote the plugin actually is an editor in New York. And I think when I first bought it, it was on version 2 or 3. And I actually emailed him and got him to add some features to help me do a job I was trying to do, which he quite happily did. And yeah, I couldn't live without it now. In fact, I'm quite surprised Adobe have never built something like that in. Because from an automation point of view, like where Harry's example gives you a lot of control with color and everything, this is kind of idiot proof. Like it's as simple as filling in a spreadsheet. Like, in fact, I know the last football event I worked on, my producer's son actually did all the spreadsheet information. Yeah.
You know, if you do a little Googling, there's a number of articles about getting Google Sheets to JSON. If you enable a sharing feature, there's a link that you can publish, and then it actually publishes it to JSON as well. Just to mention to that for folks that might be curious. Not to
Cool,
say that it's one. I thought it was really interesting because we didn't really plan this, but we kind of took two very different solutions to a similar idea, and it all kind of came together and like we
Yeah,
planned
exactly.
it this way.
I think that's an appropriate frame to leave it on.
All righty. Yeah, that's amazing, Harry. Thank you so much, everyone. Now let me just make myself presenter first. Hey, Simon.
I thoroughly agree and endorse your use of visuals.
Can you do the pose?
And I missed the beginning bit, but I was just really wanting somebody to have made that connection about JSON, talking about JSON graphics and so on. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a really nice one. So if you're missing out the last sessions, or if you want to check the recording of these sessions, feel free to check them in our YouTube channel, Maxon Training Team, as you can see. And also, T-shirt, free T-shirt. You have the codes in the chat, demystifying 03. And don't forget that next month we will be joined by the Cinema 4D trainers, and we will have some series on Cinema 4D. Right. And thank you very much for joining us in March sessions. It's been great, and it's been a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and thank you so much, and see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.